Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Gayathri, your host, and today we move into episode 18 of season 3 of Catalyze Your Self, when our capacity gets ignored. This is the season where we've been staying with the many ways pressure can shape our inner world, not only in how we behave, not only in what we choose, and not only in what others may see from the outside, but in what begins changing inside all parts of our mind, inside of our nervous system, inside of our body, and inside of our relationship with our own self. Today, the conditioned pattern we are focusing on is our relationship with our capacity, our bandwidth, our available inner range through which our mind, our nervous system, and our body can continue operating with conscious presence. Our capacity is the bandwidth through which our cognition can still hold complexity without fragmenting. Our emotion can still bring signals without being immediately suppressed, intensified, or pushed away. Our consciousness can still notice what is happening while it is happening. Our nervous system can still remain in relationship with our current moment rather than moving only through protection. And our body can still communicate stress, strain, recovery, fatigue, readiness, and the need before it has even become loud enough to be heard. And when pressure enters the picture, our bandwidth can start feeling the impact of it, because pressure does not only give us more things to tackle or manage. Pressure can begin to take up the inner space we need to remain consciously present with what we are managing. And when we are not consciously present in the moment, this space may constrict and we may move past the threshold that allows ourselves to navigate life in a healthy way. And this threshold is the point where our bandwidth that supports our conscious presence begins to fall below what the moment is asking us to process, hold, decide, express, or recover from. It is the point where our cognition may still be active, but finds itself unable to handle any complexity. Our emotions may be present, but there is less room for it to be understood as signals, and it starts getting shut down or just starts spilling out. Our nervous system may still be working to support us, but it begins to organize more around protecting us than staying with presence. Our body may still be moving with us, but it begins carrying stress that has not had enough time and space to be processed and be integrated. Our conscious may move to a shallow awareness with less room to notice, reflect, and choose in real time. Our subconscious layer may begin offering familiar patterns, our habits, our meanings, and responses that were learned through repetition without the influence of our discernment for the current moment. And our unconscious layer may begin influencing us through a deeper protective impulse, stored association, bodily reactions, and responses that we have not had the space or the time to understand. Our bandwidth or capacity threshold is the point where our self is no longer fully available for us to navigate or relate to what is happening in the current moment. We may know we are near this threshold when the quality of our inner navigation begins to change. We are not simply stretched. We are less able to remain with ourself while being stretched. Our mind may narrow around urgency. Our nervous system may begin scanning for what needs to be protected. Our body starts showing indicators of stress, and emotion may become harder to access, harder to allow, or simply harder to regulate. And awareness may come in after the response instead of guiding the response as it is forming. Simply put, our capacity threshold is the point where conscious presence is no longer naturally leading how our mind, our nervous system, and our body are navigating our present moment. What this would mean is when our capacity gets ignored, what is ignored is not simply tiredness. It is not simply stress. It is not simply the need for a break. What gets ignored is the compression of the bandwidth through which we remain connected to ourselves while simply navigating life. And the question each of us must ask ourselves is, how aware are we of our threshold? How well do we recognize the point where our bandwidth begins to compress? Do we know the point where our self is no longer operating in an aligned, integrated, and conscious manner? Do we know the difference of experience within ourself when discomfort that coexists with growth is present versus the crossover of the threshold that starts the fragmentation of our mind? Back in episode 15, we spent time on when discomfort becomes our guardrail, our boundary, our reason to stop. I would encourage you to check that episode, even if it is as a reminder, because it holds an important part of this season's discernment around discomfort, boundaries, avoidance, growth, and conscious presence. In that episode, we stayed with how discomfort can begin functioning as our guardrail when we organize ourselves around getting away from it before we understand what it is trying to show us. We stayed with the understanding that discomfort brings information and that discomfort itself is not complete clarity. And today, when we speak about capacity and threshold, that clarity that comes from discerning the information discomfort brings becomes critical. Because growth asks us to stay with discomfort. Growth can ask us to hear something that unsettles our previous understanding. So our work is to stay consciously present enough to understand what is happening to our bandwidth while discomfort is present. When we are in a healthy connection with ourself, where our mind is integrated and consciously present, discomfort can exist inside of growth. We may feel stretched, uncertain, exposed, challenged, or unsteady, and still have enough bandwidth for our mind, our nervous system, and body to remain connected and aligned with ourselves. And on the other side of this equation, what this also means is that if we have lived under pressure for long enough, compressed bandwidth can start feeling like regular day-to-day life. A tense body can feel like readiness. A scanning mind can feel like responsibility. A vigilant nervous system can feel like we're just staying prepared. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, we may ignore our capacity getting compressed because allowing it to matter would ask something from us. It may ask us to slow a pace that others are expecting us to maintain. It may ask us to acknowledge something we have been avoiding. It may ask us to revisit an expectation, a timeline, a relationship dynamic, a role, or a responsibility. It may ask us to recognize that something meaningful is exceeding the bandwidth available within our mind, our nervous system, and body. And that can feel difficult to face, especially when the pressure is attached to something we value. Love, family, work, leadership, caregiving, survival, commitment, purpose, responsibility. When the pressure is meaningful, capacity signals can feel harder to honor because acknowledging them may feel as though we are questioning something we care about. So today our focus is to slow down and understand the point where pressure begins compressing the bandwidth of our mind, our nervous system, and body, and to ask, whether conscious presence can return before fragmentation or shutdown becomes the way we protect ourselves. And to truly understand this, we have to first understand how we end up simply ignoring our capacity. Because most of the time, this does not begin with a conscious decision to disregard ourself. It begins so much more subtly. It begins when the signals from our mind, our nervous system, and body are present, but they do not feel significant enough to change anything yet. We notice that we are a little bit more tense. We notice that our patience is now thinner. We notice that we feel tired more often than not. We notice that a conversation feels so much heavier than it usually would have. And instead of allowing these signals to become information, we move past them. All the while, our mind, our nervous system, and body may be showing us that our bandwidth is compressing, that our self is no longer fully available in the way our moment now requires, that conscious presence of mind is no longer naturally leading how we are navigating life. And when we do not recognize this as capacity compression, we continue treating it as something to manage instead of something to understand. This is often the first way our capacity gets ignored. The signal is present, but we do not yet know how to read it. And then another layer comes in. Capacity compression can feel familiar. For those of us who have lived under pressure for a very long time, the compressed state may not feel unusual. It may feel like this is just how life is. And we know this. Familiarity can make something feel safe, even when it is not. Even when it is not safe or aligned. So we may not notice that our bandwidth is compressed because we have adapted to living inside of this compression. And this is where the pattern becomes so much more difficult for us to even recognize or see. Because capacity compression does not always feel like distress. It may even feel like discipline, focus, and control. It may feel like how we remain acceptable, dependable, responsible, and composed. And when the compressed state has been rewarded by the outside world, it becomes even harder to question. If our life, our work, our family, or our relationships have benefited from us being available under pressure, then our capacity compression may have been reinforced for a very long time. We may have received approval when we stay composed. We may have received appreciation when we absorbed more regardless of our bandwidth. We may have been trusted more when we did not call out what something was requiring from us. We may have been seen as dependable when we continued with less bandwidth than what was healthy for ourselves. And over time, that approval can teach us something. It can teach us that our compressed state is what is valuable. It can teach us that our capacity signals are inconvenient because they interrupt what has already been expected from us. And this is another way capacity gets ignored, not only by us, but also by the arrangements we are part of. A workplace can get used to one person being responsive at any hour. A relationship can get used to one person adjusting to what is being asked of them. A role can get built around one person's ability to absorb complexity without showing the strain of it. And when that happens, capacity compression may not be recognized as such. It may be treated as part of the role, part of the personality, part of what makes us who we are. We become the steady one, the available one, the understanding one, the strong one, the one who does not make things more difficult. And when our identity becomes attached to being that person, our capacity signals can feel threatening. Because now the signal is not only asking us to notice our bandwidth, It may be asking us to revisit who we have been allowed to be. It may be asking us to acknowledge that the version of us others depend on may not be the full truth of ourself. It may be asking us to allow needs and limits and internal strain to become visible. And for many of us, that is not simple, especially if we've been conditioned in life to view capacity compression as something we are not supposed to acknowledge. Because acknowledging it may bring forward a part of us that our conditioning taught us to keep quiet. Acknowledging them may feel as though we are questioning what we value. If we notice that caregiving is compressing our bandwidth, we may feel as though we are questioning our love. If we notice that leadership is compressing our bandwidth, we may feel as though we are questioning our commitment. If we notice that our work is compressing our bandwidth, we may feel as though we are questioning our ambition or our discipline. If we notice that family expectations are compressing our bandwidth, we may feel as though we are questioning our loyalty. If we notice that survival pressure is compressing our bandwidth, we may feel as though we do not have the right to pause because there are real consequences attached to stopping or slowing down. And still, what we must recognize is that meaningful pressure can also compress bandwidth. And meaning does not remove the need for conscious presence. Love does not remove the need for self-health. Responsibility does not remove the need for the mind, nervous system, and body to remain included in how that responsibility is carried out in a healthy way. And when we forget this, we may keep moving because the meaning is real, while our bandwidth continues to narrow because the pressure is also real. And another reason capacity compression gets ignored is that the consequence of honoring it can feel immediate, while the consequence of ignoring it can feel delayed. If we allow capacity to matter today, something may have to change today, and therefore the consequence of it can be felt in a very real way today. And those consequences can have names and faces and schedules and relationships and outcomes attached to them. The consequence of ignoring our capacity may feel so much further away. It may show up later as exhaustion, as resentment, as numbness, as confusion or loss of clarity. As a body that no longer recovers the way it used to, as a nervous system that cannot settle, as emotion that comes out all at once or becomes harder to access at all, as a relationship with self that becomes quieter because we have learned to hear ourselves only after we have moved past what needed our attention. So in the moment, ignoring our capacity can feel easier because we choose consequences that feel so much further away. And this is where we can begin to understand why this pattern can continue. We are not always choosing between honoring capacity and ignoring capacity in a clean, obvious way. Often we are choosing between visible disruption and hidden harm that can come later. And when pressure is already present, visible disruption can feel like one more thing we do not have the bandwidth to hold. And we decide to ignore our dwindling capacity and just keep going. We postpone the need to understand why our inner navigation no longer feels the same. And over time, these postponements become the pattern of ignoring our capacity. And this is important for us to recognize because capacity compression can also be ignored when we are waiting for pressure to end. We may tell ourselves after this week, after this project, after this transition, after this family situation, after this decision, after this season, after this one more thing. And there may be truth to that, absolutely. As in, That specific pressure may be temporary, a deadline may pass, a transition may settle. However, when our relationship with capacity is shaped by waiting for pressure to end, we may miss the fact that pressure often does not end cleanly. One pressure releases and another one enters into the picture. One responsibility settles and another becomes visible. So the question becomes not only whether the pressure will end, the question becomes what happens to ourself while we are waiting for it to end. Because capacity is not only affected by the presence of pressure, it is affected by how long we continue without allowing conscious presence of mind to return to how we are meeting that pressure. And this is also why comparing our capacity to someone else's can become one of the ways we ignore our own threshold. We may look around and decide our response is unreasonable because someone else appears to be handling more. We may compare our recovery to someone else's availability. We may compare our emotional signal to someone else's composure. We may compare our bandwidth to what another person can carry in a completely different body, with a different history, different support systems, different conditioning, different responsibilities, and different internal relationship with pressure. And when we do this, we move away from the very signals that are trying to guide our own unique self. Our capacity is not recognized through compression. Our capacity is recognized through relationship with our own mind, our nervous system, our body, and ourself. Our threshold belongs to our unique lived reality. It is shaped by what we are carrying now. It is shaped by what has already been carried by us so far. It is shaped by what our nervous system has learned throughout our life. It is shaped by what our body is recovering from. It is shaped by the meaning attached to pressure. It is shaped by how much choice we feel we have. It is shaped by the support available to us. It is shaped by whether our conscious presence of mind has room to participate. So when we compare our threshold to someone else's visible life, we may be abandoning the only place where our threshold can actually be known by us, inside of our own self. Because when our capacity gets ignored, what continues to be impacted is the quality of our inner navigation. Our cognition may keep processing, but with less space for complexity. Our emotions may be signaling, but with less room to be understood before they are intensified or suppressed or expressed through the stress. Our conscious layer may still notice, but the noticing may not have enough room to guide us in the real-time moment. Our subconscious may keep reaching for what has been familiar because familiar patterns often feel safer for our nervous system. Our unconscious may continue influencing our responses through our body level reactions, protective impulses, and stored associations that we may not even fully understand in the moment because our discernment is not in play. Our nervous system may keep trying to protect us, but protection may be taking the lead when presence is what is meant to lead. And our body may keep carrying what has not had enough space to be integrated. So this impact is not only exhaustion, it is not only stress, it is not only that we are ignoring rest. The deeper concern for us is that our self has less access to the very capacity and bandwidth through which we navigate life with alignment, integration, and conscious presence. And when that continues long enough, life can begin to feel harder to read clearly. It feels chaotic. A decision may feel urgent before it is understood. A conversation may feel threatening before we have listened to what is truly being said. A responsibility may feel non-negotiable before we have checked whether what we are carrying is still healthy. A feeling may seem inconvenient before we've allowed it to reveal what it is signaling. A body signal may seem like something we just push through before we recognize the body is part of the intelligence that our entire being has to try to guide us back to self-health. And this is why our relationship with capacity is so valuable, because it tells us whether our internal bandwidth needed for conscious navigation is still available within ourselves. And if it is no longer available in the way the moment requires, then what is being asked for is our conscious shift back into alignment within our mind, body, and nervous system. A conscious shift may mean pausing long enough for our cognition to regain its space. It may mean allowing our emotion to remain a signal before it is suppressed or it starts overflowing. It may mean noticing that our nervous system has moved towards protection and offering it enough presence to recognize what is truly happening in our current moment. It may mean allowing our body to be heard before all of its signals become very loud. It may mean recognizing that our subconscious has reached for a familiar pattern and allowing discernment to re-enter. It may mean sensing that our unconscious protection is active throughout our body and giving ourselves enough space, time to process, to not make the body carry the entire truth of it all alone. It may mean calling out that something still matters, while also acknowledging that the way we are carrying it may need to change. This is where capacity is not the reason to withdraw from what matters. Capacity becomes the information that helps us remain in a healthier relationship with what matters. And this is where the SIRE model can support our return. Self-reflection allows us to look honestly at where our bandwidth has been compressing, with the willingness to see what has been happening inside of our mind, nervous system, and body. Self-awareness helps us recognize our earliest signals, the change in our thinking, the shift in our emotional access, the familiar pattern rising from our subconscious. Our self-inspiration brings us back to what is true within us. It reminds us that capacity is not an inconvenience to our purpose. Capacity is part of how we remain connected to our purpose without abandoning ourselves. Our self-regulation helps our nervous system return to enough safety that conscious presence can participate again by creating enough inner space for our mind, our nervous system, and body to return back into a healthy collaborative state. And our self-expression allows what has been recognized internally to have an external form. It may be a conversation, it may be a boundary, a request for support, a shift in our pace. And each of these practices help us stay more connected to our truth of what our self is experiencing, while life continues to ask for whatever it may be from us. A healthy connection with our capacity asks us to have a relationship with our threshold, to know what it feels like when our bandwidth is available, to know what it feels like when it begins to narrow, to know what it feels like when discomfort is present, but growth is still supported by conscious presence, and to know what it feels like when pressure has crossed into the kind of compression where our mind begins to fragment, our nervous system begins to protect, our body begins to carry unintegrated stress, and our self is no longer available for us in the current moment. And now, as we close today, I want to invite all of us to sit with a few reflective considerations. Where have we noticed our bandwidth compressing and we chose to continue anyway? Where have we been waiting for pressure to end while our self has been signaling that our capacity has been tightening? Where have we compared our capacity to someone else's visible life and moved away from the only place our threshold can actually be truly known? And what would it look like for conscious presence to return before fragmentation, before our shutdown becomes the way our mind, our nervous system, and body can protect itself? These are not questions for quick answers. These are questions that can help us support the health of a relationship. Because the work here is to come back into honest relationship with our own self. And in our next episode, episode 19, when rest feels like a threat, we will look at a different conditioned pattern under pressure. What happens inside of our mind, our nervous system, and body when rest is no longer experienced as simple, available, or even safe. Because rest is not only an action we take. For many of us, rest has a relationship with safety, identity, responsibility, productivity, worth, and what our nervous system has learned to expect from life. So in episode 19, we will stay with why slowing down can feel threatening, even when we may recognize the value of rest, and what may be happening within ourselves when stillness, pause, or recovery does not feel easy to follow. So thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Gayathri, your host, and I'm grateful for the space that we share here. Please do share your thoughts and perspectives through the platforms you're listening from. And please share with anyone you feel can find value in joining us in this journey. And until next time, let us continue practicing conscious presence of mind so we can keep building strength in the relationship we have with our own self.